Hi, everybody. I get a microphone. What do we lose when it's easy to use? I wrote it so it rhymed. I run a design studio in town called Rumors. This is our website. It does this thing where when you hover over a link, these images appear. They kind of go boop, boop, boop. You can't click on them, though. They track with the cursor, so they sort of like move away from you. And it's, I don't know why you're laughing. It's a little annoying. It's a little annoying. And so the day that we launched, this thread went up on Designer News. Designer News is like hacker news, which is to say, mixed bag. They didn't like it. They didn't like a few things about it. They didn't like that it was all text because nobody reads on the internet, and they didn't like the rollover effect, you know, because it's annoying. You'll note this is the best comment, which I like. It's like that's number one. But this other word kept coming up in the comments, right? This word usability. Usability. If you design for the internet, usability is this word that you're going to encounter a bunch, and it's often treated as the like go-to, toss-it-out sole criteria of judgment for web design. Low usability, high usability, but it's this slippery term because the meaning of it is so vague, and usable for whom, right, and to what end. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about this idea of usability. I want to talk about it as this criteria that we uphold. But to get there, I want to start by talking about a certain accepted style of design on the web. This is a tweet by a guy named John Gold. You may have seen it, or you certainly probably can sympathize with the sentiment. I think of this as product web style. Like you know it, you've seen it, it's been dominant for years. And many of you in the room will recognize, even in this sort of like abstracted form, that these sites are mock-ups of Bootstrap. So what's Bootstrap? Bootstrap is a front-end framework that's developed by a couple people at Twitter in 2011. It's a package of code, it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that provides a foundation on which a website can be easily built. It also standardizes design patterns. So for Twitter, this meant that new web applications, and in particular mobile web applications, could be built more efficiently. And it was so useful that the designers decided to make it open source, and they released it to the public. For those of you bracing, by the way, for a Bootstrap rant, of which there are many to be found, that's not where I'm coming from. I think Bootstrap is an incredible tool. Bootstrap allows you to do plenty of different things. But you could also just use it as it is, right out of the box. And so it was released at a time when there was a charged investment in web startups and in the mobile web. And if you were building this web startup, and the need to be first to market is real, like that's just a market need. Why spend time making changes? Why spend time customizing or thinking through things when Bootstrap got you there easy? You know, it just solved problems for you right out of the box. And if you didn't want to build the site yourself, there were people that sold templates. Those templates went from being just for product sites, product launch sites, to being for family reunions, to being for like the website for your favorite author. Very soon it was just everywhere. Now, a lot of those product sites knew that their websites looked like other websites, looked like other product sites, and that sounds dismissive, right? But really what I mean is that those sites looked like a product site. It looked like it came out of Silicon Valley. It looked like it belonged there, and that lent it a certain legitimacy. Like you looked real because you looked like everything else. Now, there's this certain accepted wisdom within a certain range of the industry, or the various industries that we probably mostly take part in, that says homogeneity is easier for the user because the more familiar an interface, the less mental processing, right? The less cognitive load, to use the term, and the higher the rate of conversion. Like the more visitors that will be converted into customers or buyers or subscribers or whatever you want them to be, the more people will take the action you want them to take. And conversions make or break a business. So yeah, make that button look more like a button and make it eye-catching and put it where people expect the button to be. Because homogeneity reduces the friction between user and outcome. Friction. I love this. As a piece of jargon, I think friction is phenomenal, right? Because it's like, you can like feel it. Like friction is the resistance. It's the force that pushes against you. It's the thing that slows you down. And the more friction, the more effort required to complete a task. I want to quote something here. This is a comment by a guy named Eric Speakerman. He is a prominent type designer. This was left in reference to an article on Medium entitled "In Defense of Homogeneous Design," so sort of appropriate here. Speakerman argues that rather than continually rethink experiences, web designers should stay within the parameters that every user understands. He also, I will note, begs us to learn from old dudes, so I feel like it's tempting to just dismiss it out of hand. But I think that we should take it seriously. We should take it seriously, because this is a very commonly held position. Like, the web should be an invisible container for content, an invisible container for calls to action. The experience itself shouldn't draw away from the material at hand. It should be, in other words, more like a book. But the web, I think, as we can probably all acknowledge, is not a book, right? It's not a medium like that at all. It's a medium that we operate. It's a medium that we inhabit. It's a medium that dictates the parameters of our identities and our experience. A criteria of judgment for that medium that prioritizes only those experiences which guide users, which guide you and me, towards predefined endpoints, reduces the medium into a series of consumer efficiencies, reduces the medium into a series of frictionless experiences dedicated to drive you towards an endpoint. Okay, I think that that is a limiting option for the medium and for the medium's future and for the growth of the web. But if usability, as this sort of slippery catch-all, isn't the sole criteria when judging user experiences, what else is there? Okay. So to answer that, I'm going to borrow and expand on a framework first developed by the designer and artist Laurel Schwolst, who began this as part of her syllabus for an interactive design course at Yale. Is it specific? Does it turn idea into form? And does it benefit the user? So I use these criteria in my own practice because I think they apply to every interactive project that we work on, regardless of client or purpose. They're measurements of experiences rather than outcomes. In that sense, I think that they really do speak to user experiences. I want to walk through them each, a little, just a little. Is it specific? Is the design specific? Is the interface built for its purpose? Does it understand its audience, and does it address its context? I don't know if you've seen this yet. I have the true joy, I think, of introducing you to the best website on the World Wide Web. McMaster-Carr is an industrial supplier for factories and workshops, and it's intended for an audience of professionals who share a certain literacy. So it operates with this logic that's pretty rare for consumer-facing stores. The site's really dense. It vacillates between tiny images and dense text. Nothing is sexy. Nothing is appealing. It requires a lot of processing. Now, that specificity, that information density, is a response to the audience's literacy. It is itself a useful friction, and it allows for a nuanced interface that offers a great deal of control. Okay, so haven't even talked about it yet. This is the website for the Yale School of Art. It wasn't meant as a laugh line, but it's a wiki. You can add images, you can add text, you can change the background, you can mess with colors. It's available to anyone within the community. Now, it doesn't look like it, but it functions in a really similar manner to the McMaster-Carr site. It's addressing a very specific audience that shares a common literacy. Okay, but here, rather than maximize function in the interest of that literacy, the site maximizes style. Because style, at its most specific and its most valuable, is a vernacular. And that vernacular is often coded. It's transmitting to a limited audience. Like, an experience like this pushes some people away. And if you read the comments about this on the greater web from prospective art students, you'll see it pushes people away. It culls rather than expands the audience, right? But that's kind of the point. The idea here is that the website is a filter that is transmitting a certain message, a certain signal to like-minded people. It limits the applicants to people who see themselves in the experience. Okay, does it turn idea into form? I think of this as an inherent, maybe the inherent quality, meaning, purpose of design. So I spoke earlier about how the web isn't just an invisible container for content. Well, another way to say that is that the design and experience of an interface can offer as much meaning as the text or the photos or the videos that we place within that interface. So even the simplest interface and the simplest website convey an idea. This is a website with a single looping GIF full screen. It's Oprah. She has bees. The idea here is really specific, and it's really immediate, and it's really singular. The GIF is the content, and that's all there is to it. Full screen, no matter what you're doing, mobile friendly, I think, maybe not. Didn't test it, who knows? It didn't make it. But it's the behavior of this content, right? It fills the screen, it offers no references, it offers no gestures towards the outside world. There's no actions for you to take, there's no information other than the thing itself. And that's what makes the experience meaningful. The design makes the experience meaningful, even if the design is limited, and even if that meaning is absurd. But the more that we shift the balance from content to interface, the more opportunity we have to introduce complex meanings into the experience. This is the website for Print and Matter. Print and Matter is a store that sells artist books in New York City. And while it sells things online, it's obviously very far from Amazon. It presents the user with a very unusual interface. These colored boxes that you see, the site calls tables, and it can take a moment to understand why. They're like literally analogs of tables, of physical tables, just like the tables that you find in the brick and mortar store. And on each table is this series of books. So the books are shown as covers, the covers are shown to scale, the tables are interfaces for the website itself. So you go into a collection and you can maneuver within the book covers. The interface takes some processing, it takes some solving. It's a little bit like a simple puzzle in some ways, but the reward is a richer understanding of meaning, of both the store and of the content, the artist books, which place such an emphasis on the physical. The reward of the interface is that it mirrors the value of the store, and the reward of your processing it is that you internalize that and you take part. It's a very generous design, even though at a glance it's a little bit, it's certainly unorthodox. Okay, so this last one is a matter of ethics, and therefore a little bit harder to pin down. Does it benefit the user? I don't just mean the content, although I think it's important that we think about the work we do. I mean the consequences of the interface decisions themselves. And it's probably easiest to understand this in the negative. Is the interface deceptive? Does it act against the interest of the user? So exploitation in the interest of conversion has led to some terrible user experiences. Like garbage slideshow websites that just have you clicking and reloading just to get ad numbers up. And that's not surprising because there's money to be made there. Another famous example is the way that LinkedIn used to trick new users into sending join LinkedIn emails to all their contacts, regardless of whether those people were already on LinkedIn. So stuff like this are usually referred to in the industry as dark patterns. Dark patterns are frictionless design taken to the logical conclusion. Useful hurdles are reduced, interfaces misdirect, solely for the benefit of the website's owner. Dark patterns aren't a bug, they're a feature. They're to be expected when the metrics for success are things like user acquisition and growth. And there's a reason that web platforms spend so much time reducing the friction for user acquisition and growth. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, they want to quickly usher you onto the site, and they want you to bring people along with them. They want to grow. On the other hand, there's the web form meta filter, which works really hard to keep you out. So this is what you see when you try to sign in. This is something the writer Anil Dash spoke about recently on the Track Changes podcast, and I thought it was a really compelling argument. I wanted to bring it up here. When you try to sign up for Metafilter, it stops you in your tracks. It like forces you to read this explanation of the site, and it's a code of conduct, and it's a little bit dense. And then it requires that you pay $5 for the privilege. Then it has you wait a week before you can post anything. It's total friction. That's it. There's all these walls. Now, this isn't so much a benefit to the user as it is a benefit to the community. By forcing you through this process, it requires that you understand the values of the community. $5 isn't, nothing, but it's also like, it's just enough of a wall. Dash compared this to a service like Twitter, which has an economic imperative, again, of growth at any cost. Given that Twitter enables direct communication between strangers, that lack of shared values makes for a toxic environment. It leads to abuse. Okay. All of this leads to what I think of as frustration threshold. How far can we push friction to the point just prior to it becoming frustration? That is like the guiding principle in my work. That sounds so snotty. Apologies. Just riffed on it, feel bad about it, but there you go. Still, I think it's important to think about. Where the threshold lies depends on a couple of things, and one of them is the needs of the audience. When the outcome or the endpoint that a user desires is very specific, that frustration threshold is at a minimum. Like when you're trying to figure out the address to a restaurant, you get frustrated immediately. But when you don't have a very specific and urgent desire, the frustration threshold is farther off. There's room in the interface to allow exploration or play or even confusion. And the other thing it depends on is the size and the makeup of the audience. The wider the audience, the more total the platform, the more democratic the platform, the less you can anticipate what each person is bringing to the table. The interface needs to be more accommodating to suit. But then the smaller the audience, the more traits they share, the more you can play. The more confident you can be that your audience will understand what it is that you're doing, or that they'll have the literacy to tackle a complex interface. OK, so the takeaway. Difficulty is slow and it doesn't scale, but it's not the enemy. And we should focus, rather than on this vague idea of usability, on user experiences that address specific needs, make use of design's capacity to give form to ideas, and operate with the user's interests in mind. But doing so will sort of like require that we no longer demand everything be easy to use, and instead work out just what should be difficult. Thank you.